That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine. Nyland going ballistic. He's a freaking madman.
I'm Chris Nyland, and this is the Raw Knuckles Podcast. Stu Cowan, Montreal Gazette. Great to have you here on the Raw Knuckles Podcast. Listen, this Montreal Canadiens fan base has shown remarkable patience with what's going on here with this organization. I think Ken Hughes and Jeff Gorton coming in here was just a great move by ownership to bring these guys in. Are you surprised at all by the patience that this, at times, certainly a spoiled fan base over the years, but this team hasn't won anything in a long time. Are you surprised by it?
Well, I was part of that spoiled fan base growing up. Mentioned many times, my 5 years in high school, the Habs won 4 Stanley Cups, and you'd skip school once a year and go watch the parade. It was an annual event. When Jeff Molson first spoke about this rebuild, I wondered about what the patience would be. I really did. But as you know, Knuckles, Montreal hockey fans are smart. And Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes and Jeff Molson have been very honest with the fans about this rebuild and what their plan is and what their goal is to have a team that doesn't just get into the playoffs and then anything can happen, as Marc Bergevin used to like to say. They want to be a team like Boston or Tampa or teams that are making the playoffs is almost a given, and then it's how far can you go. And I think the fact that they've made so many smart moves along the way, including the latest, picking up Patrick Laine for no knock on Jordan Harris, but almost for nothing, because I don't know if there was a spot for Jordan Harris on this team, and I love Jordan Harris. But they've made so smart move after smart move after smart move, and I think the fans see that. So I think that's why the fans are willing to be patient, and they're seeing the progress. They're seeing Juraj Slafkovsky, the progress he made last year. They're seeing Alex Newhook and how he was in the second
no
half.
question the progress
so I think
he made.
I think and that's why the fans are patient.
You know, you look at certainly – what's that?
I think that's why the fans are patient, because they've seen smart moves being made by management.
When we look at the way this team is built right now, and there's a lot of great young talent, there's no question about it. When this management team starts to make some moves now, and they're going to prepare this organization to be a regular playoff team, what are some of the moves you think they have to make to prepare this team to play playoff hockey, to get into the playoffs, and then have players that are going to be able to be standing at the end of 4 7-game series?
I think they need to add. They still need more goal scoring from their forwards. I think that's been their biggest problem. That's why they went and got Patrick Laine to hopefully have a legitimate top 6 forwards. But they still need more guys. But they're a little bit handcuffed from some of the contracts previously, right? You still got Christian Dvorak, you still got Brendan Gallagher, you still got Josh Anderson. I love Brendan Gallagher. He's going to give you everything he can. I think he can still score 15 to 20 goals if he's put with steady line mates. I think that's a key for him moving forward. Josh Anderson, it's hard to explain what happened to him last year. He just looked totally lost. So their sort of hands are tied. I mean, those 3 guys combined are making $20 million, roughly a quarter of the payroll. So, hopefully for the Canadiens, those guys can bounce back next season and provide more offense. But there's only so much you can do, right? With the salary cap, you got money in, money out. So it's sort of, I still wouldn't be surprised if Kent Hughes makes another move before the season starts to try and add another forward who can score. But Gallagher's contract and Dvorak's contract and Anderson's contract, they're going to be almost impossible to move at this point.
Yeah, there's no question about that. They're stuck with those. You got so many defensemen, and which is a good thing. That's a great thing. So when you're in that position to stop buying guys, and some draft picks coming up next year, where they got 2 in the first, 2 in the second, 3 in the third, like they're loaded up with draft picks. So they're in a great position to move. And again, they've shown they can make those great moves. But you also have to have those players available. What do you think who are some of the players you think they'd be targeting, when you're looking at making that move into the playoffs and having that consistent playoff team, a team that can sustain winning on a regular basis.
As far as a trade, you mean?
Yeah, like bring in a trade or bring in guys in here that can I spoke with Jeff Gordon, and he said that at some point we're going to add some men to the lineup, meaning not that they get a bunch of boys, no, but guys that are able to get in the corners and hang on to the puck and hang on to the puck in the neutral zone and have offensive zone and have that offensive zone time and not always one and done and out. You got guys that can grind it down low, like guys we see with the Florida Panthers. So who are some of those players you think they could be targeting down the road?
Yeah, I mean, you've said that several times, like they need more men. And as you mentioned, back on that 86 team that you were part of, there was a lot of men on that team, a lot of guys that were just hard and tough and difficult to play against. And one of the guys that I think they have coming up is Arbor Jackie's brother, right? Florian Jackie is a guy who I think moving forward could be a guy who's very difficult to play against. Trade-wise, I mean, Trevor Zegras is a name that keeps popping up. Anaheim, it looks like he wants out of there. He's not that man.
What do you really think of that player, though? What do you really think of that player? When I hear his name, I'm going, listen, I get the flash and the bang and all that stuff, but do you really think that guy's a winner?
Well, it's hard to say because, I mean, he's in Anaheim, right? And we don't really, Anaheim comes here once a year. We don't really see him that much. We don't get a close thing. I mean, you hear stuff, reports and about him out there. He's good friends with Cole Caulfield. I mean, that's a plus, I think, as far as if the Canes were to bring him here and have Cole sell him on what's going on here and what Marty St. Louis' system and how everybody's buying into it. And as I said, they need guys who can score. And he can score, and it's not easy to find those guys. And, they took a risk on Patrick Laine, which I think was a smart risk to take because he was available. And here's another guy. It's not necessarily who you want. It's also who's available, right, that you can bring here. So you can't have too much goal scoring. I mean, they need Joshua was a guy that I'm really interested to see what they do with him this season because before they brought in Laine, I thought Joshua Roy would be on the second line. Now that they brought in, they have the top six set up. Like, where do you put Joshua Roy? Do you bury him on the fourth line? Do you put him back in Laval? Do you play him on the third line and drop one of those veteran guys I mentioned before down to the fourth line? It's one of the questions we're going to have at training camp. But I think for me, Joshua Roy, I think can be a key player for this team moving forward. He has offensive ability. He's got decent size. He's played at the World Junior Tournament and been very successful there. We've seen flashes of him, right? He was a number 1 overall pick in the Quebec Junior League draft for a reason. He had some work ethic issues at the time, which he struggled his first couple of years in junior, but those seem to have been taken care of. And he's a guy I think that the Canadians will be counting on moving forward as somebody they already have in the system. And then you got Demidov coming up, you got Michael Hage coming up. As Kent Hughes said, the trade for Laine was for the present, but at the draft, he brought in guys for the future that can help them offensively also.
All right, when we look up front, obviously, Slafkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield, great season last year by Slafkovsky. Looks like he's found his way. There was a lot of talk about this kid when he first came in. People forget it. 18 years old. I mean, it's incredible what he's done, the progress he's made. And the expectation is now, okay, last season he had, 50 points. What is it this year? They 15 points more? What do you think for Uri this year?
Yeah, I think Ken Hughes has mentioned that he expects almost Uri to take another dip next year. He's only 20 years old now. It's a tough, better than anyone, Knuckles. It's hard to get to the NHL. It's even harder to stay there, right? And be consistent. And that's the key to being a good player in the NHL is being consistent. And Uri was consistent through the second half of last season. I wrote a column early last season, maybe 20 games in, saying that, they need to send him back to Laval. He just looked like he was lost on the ice, especially in his own end. But they worked with him and worked with him and worked with him. And Adam Nicholas did a lot of video work with him. And he really progressed well. And we saw why the Canadians decided to make him their number 1 overall pick. So I'm not going to put too much high expectations on him because of his age. I think 25 goals next season would be a good season for him to go from 20 to 25. And he's just 20 years old. I think it was Elliot Friedman tweeted the other day that someone had seen him working out back home, and apparently he's a beast. I mean, he already was a beast, but apparently
he's an animal.
Bigger. And I mean, I remember when the day before the draft, walking up beside him and going, I'm 6'3", I'm looking at this kid and going, "You're 18 years old, and he's a man." You're talking about they need men. He is a man. So moving forward, Arber Xhekaj is a man at a young age. But for the other thing I really liked about Slafkovsky, and one of the reasons Kent Hughes mentioned they drafted him, is that they figured he could handle everything that comes with playing in Montreal. And Knuckles, Montreal's the best place to play when things are going good and worst place to play when things are going bad. But he handled all the ups and downs really well, especially for a kid his age, and especially for a kid from a different country, right? New country, new language, smaller rink, adjusting to living in the spotlight. I mean, he is a big star back home, but, Montreal, everywhere he goes, he can't go out without getting stopped for an autograph or a photo. You know what that's like yourself. But for a kid his age, I think he handled it so well. He didn't get too high when there were highs, and he didn't get too low when there were lows. He kept a pretty steady composure throughout the season. And comparing that to Jesperi Kotkaniemi, I remember his rookie season, or his first couple of seasons, when things were good, he was really happy and good, and when things were bad, he was really down on himself. And that can be really hard for a young player. So I think Slafkovsky has a mental makeup to handle what comes with playing in this city. I think a lot of the guys that Canadians have brought in, that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton have brought in, have that mentality that they can handle the good stuff and the bad stuff. That's one of the reasons they drafted Demidov. I mean, that video that Canadians put out behind the scenes at the draft, that's one of the questions they asked guys. And Michael, how are you going to be able to handle playing in Montreal? And Jacob Fowler, the goalie's another guy. Talking with him at development camp, the kid's got confidence. He wants the spotlight, right? There's guys that, Patrick Waugh, PK when he was here, Guy Lafleur, guys that, when the brighter the spotlight, the better they seem to play. So those are the kind of guys the Canadians are trying to find, and they have a few of them.
Yeah, it's great. A lot of people said, listen, I don't think there's many people you interview that are going to come here that are going to say, well, I won't be able to deal with the spotlight. Everybody's going to say they can. But when you get here and you deal with it, it's a whole different animal. And believe me, you've seen it over the years. You've seen guys who can't handle it, and they end up moving on. And I'm not pointing to any guy who won't be able to do it or will, but there's one thing saying it and one thing following through.
Well, Jonathan Drouin is an example, right? I mean, it ate him up here. I remember when he first got traded here.
There you go. He said he'd be able to deal with it, right?
Yeah, I spoke with his agent, Alan Walsh, after he came here, and I said, what's your best advice to your client coming into this market? And he said, just have fun with it. And Jonathan, I like Jonathan Drouin as a person. He's a good person. I had great dealings with him, but the pressure and especially for a French Canadian kid playing here, it ate away at him. And it affected his mental health. And you see how much better he was when he got out of here and he went to Colorado, where he can walk down the street and nobody knows who he is. And nobody, it's not playing for the Denver Broncos, right? He's playing for Colorado for the Avalanche. So, and that's not a personal knock on Jonathan Drouin. Different people
not at all.
are made up mentally different. Some people can handle things like that better than others. And there's a long list of guys who have been eaten up by the pressure here. And I'm sure you had some teammates who, when you were playing Knuckles, that some of the guys just struggled.
Doug Wickenheiser.
Yeah.
Perry Turnbull. Perry Turnbull. It was tough. And there's no question that, I think, again, doing your homework and the interviews they do, they can get judge a guy by his certainly his personality and the way they ask some of them probing questions that can tell a lot about a young kid who's coming in here and one day hopefully develop into a young man.
Well, they're not taking the kid's word for it, right? Knuckles, they're not saying, you say no kid's going to go in there and say, no, I can't handle the pressure in Montreal. They're asking other questions. How were you able to handle it when you first came here?
Me? I couldn't do anything. I could have skated out in the ice with nothing on and I would have been fine. Listen, my first go around here, I remember Red wrote. I remember I went after Alan Hakeslaver one night. He ran flower, and I went after him. I dropped my glove again. Anyway, I got suspended. But Red wrote an article. I think I pulled the Paul Flaherty grabbed me, and I pulled away from him, and he fell because he couldn't skate. And I got suspended for 2 games. But Red Fisher wrote an article next day. I was a young kid, right? he wrote the article, and it said the Canadians don't need a guy like Chris Nyland. And I was like, I read it. I'm like, holy shit. We don't read the paper, but I read it. I'm like, I thought like, oh my God, I'm out of here. This guy wrote this bad thing, and I was nervous. It got to me a little bit. And then at the time, Rocket Rashad was writing, I think, for the Star, and he wrote an article saying Rocket Nyland does belong with the Canadian, which was awesome, right? I'm there, the Rocket, right? But so, those things can affect you when stuff like that happens. But boy, like once I was fighting and doing that all the time, not that I wasn't nervous about my job, like I had to establish myself. I was fine with the rest of it. I mean, I think I had fun in interviews. I was just being myself. I wasn't trying to ham it up. I was just being me and not trying to impress anybody, just do my job. And, everything kind of fell into place. I honestly, and I was really, at the time, I didn't understand the French English thing at all. And it honestly, it didn't bother me. I wasn't like where it might have affected some people. It didn't bother me at all. And I got along, and yeah. So
it's interesting you say that, because Chantal Maccabee told me when she took over her new job with the Canadians, and I've known Chantal for years, going back to her days with RDS and she told me that's one of the things she was telling the players: just be yourself in interviews. Because before, the guys were afraid. Like, I remember the first time I interviewed Nick Suzuki at a development camp. He was like, he was you could tell he was terrified he was going to say something that might not come out right. He was like, and they were all like that. It was drilled into them: don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything. And they were so nervous when you were talking to them. And now we've seen it since Chantal took over, and like
that
Cole
starts at the top, right?
Yes, well, that's right. And Cole Caulfield's got a great personality. I mean, and she told him, like, show your personality. Don't be yourself. Show who you are. And all the guys in Arbor Jacka is like that too. They're it's a fun locker room to be around now. And it's interesting too. And you were mentioning before about they don't read anything. They don't say they don't read anything. So funny story. Mike McCarron. Remember Mike McCarron when he first came up with the Canadians? And I'm in the locker room one morning. It's a morning skate or a practice, and he's sort of giving me a funny look type of thing. So I went over. I said, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?" He says, "Oh, good." He says, "That was a nice story you wrote about me the other day in the paper." So I started laughing, and I said, Mike, rookie mistake, buddy. You're supposed to say you don't read anything that we write." So he starts laughing. He pauses for a second, and then he says, "My girlfriend told me she read a good story that you wrote about me in the paper." I said, "Now you got it.
There you go. There you go. This management team has done a hell of a job bringing players in and kind of supporting those younger guys. And at the same time, not just supporting them, but bringing guys in they can learn from. Like Monahan, when he was here, I think the Nick Suzuki benefited from that in such a big way. And he had a few years, obviously couldn't keep him. He signed a contract and went somewhere. That's great. They got a draft pick for him. But those are awesome moves made by this management team. Nick Suzuki, boy, I remember the first camp he came in there, he kind of had the deer in the headlights. He's matured. He's come along. And I love the contracts they signed these guys to, Uri, Nick, and Cole. Again, these are contracts that are not going to haunt you later. I mean, down the road, and you got to sign these contracts, these kids, on projecting what they're going to do. And they've kind of shown a little bit in the early going here what they're going to do in the future. And hopefully that trend continues. This team lacks center iceman. You get Nick, Kirby Doc, injury. Now he's coming back. Boy, to see him play a full season is going to be almost, you're going to think it's going to be a miracle, right? If he's going to do it. He hasn't yet. And I'm hoping for this kid because I really love his attitude. I love what he does on the ice. He gets out there and he can play and contribute. What do you think of the upcoming season for him? It seems healthy.
I think it's probably going to be tough for him at the start because that was a major injury he had. Right?
Yeah.
That was a serious knee injury. I don't think it's going to come back and just be 100% right away. I think it'll probably be in his head. I mean, Knuckles, you went through a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's still first time you
The
get
knee
hit
lingers.
and you're worried about it. But I mean, he showed what he could do, right? I mean, he's a big, rangy guy. He can control the puck. He can do zone entries. He helps the players he's playing with. Talking about centers, one of the interesting things on that behind the scenes draft video is talking about Demidov, how he can play center also, right? He's a possibility to be another centerman moving forward. But with Kirby Dach, I felt so bad for him last season because when you walk in, as you know, Knuckles, when you walk into the press box and you go down, you go up the stairs, you come down, you go, and when you enter to go into the press box, to the left is where the injured players are. And Kirby Dach had the first seat there. It was like he was a season ticket holder. Was his season ticket. And I'd see him sitting there, and the cast of characters beside him would change as players were injured and got healthy and whatnot. But to see him there every single game, and just how tough it must have been for him, and even tougher. I mean, there's not going on the road with the guys, right? Not being part of the team when they're on the road and going out for dinners and in the locker room and all that stuff. But you're talking about Canadiens management team. They involved him in the coaches meetings, right? To make him feel more part of the team and understand how game plans are drawn up and what the coaching staff is thinking. I think that was huge, not just for him, but he can also talk to his teammates now, explain to them like what goes on behind the scenes in those coaches meetings that they don't get to see. So I think it was just a really smart move. The Canadiens are run by smart men right now. I mean, Jeff Gorton's a smart guy. Kent Hughes is a smart guy. And kudos to Jeff Molson for, we're talking at the top of the podcast about the rebuild. He bit the bullet, right? And realized this team had to be rebuilt. And it's the first time in Canadiens history, right, that they've had a full rebuild. And, the patience of the fans, again, I think is because they see a team making smart moves. And with the Laine trade, you're talking about the draft picks moving forward. Yeah, they have 2 firsts, 2 seconds next year. And then the year after that, they have a first and 2 seconds because of the Laine trade. Kent Hughes' trades, he always seems to get something and something, right? He gets the player and like Patrick Laine for Jordan Harris, 1-for-1 is a good trade. Some people might even say Jordan Harris for a second-round pick, 1-for-1 is a good trade. But he got both. And if you go through his history of trade since he's come here, it's all asset management. He always seems to get something else, what he wants and something else. And that's how you build. That's how you build it. That now they have all these guys coming up, and they still have a ton of draft picks moving forward.
Yeah, well, you get those assets, and you have things to. You build those things up, and when it's time to make that move, when you're that team that's ready to make that jump from almost there to we're here now, let's go. And you start adding those pieces that are going to help you win in the NHL playoffs, which we talked about men. Then you have all that, and that's awesome to have. And
I'm sure he got the second-round pick because he was willing to eat all of Laine's contract.
Yeah, exactly.
That's also managing the salary cap that they had. They were the only team that really had room to take Laine's full contract in. So it's like it's not. He doesn't make moves by the seat of his pants. Like everything they do is there's one move leads to another move, or is because
step
of
ahead. Yeah, you're thinking a step ahead, and that's good. You either eat 25% of that contract or half of the contract, or you get a draft pick, and that's awesome that he did that. And
we're talking before the salary structure too. I mean, Laine moves ahead of Suzuki now as the highest paid player on the team. And during the Zoom conference with Ken Hughes, I asked him about that, like for your salary structure and the dynamic. Sapkowski signed for less than Suzuki. Caulfield signed for less than Suzuki. Sort of set a bar with Suzuki's contract. Now Laine goes above that. But as Ken Hughes said, well, I didn't sign him to that contract.
Yeah, he acquired.
And it's only 2 years. Like I think if Laine had 3 years left on this contract, they probably don't make that trade. Right, but it's 2 years, so it works well for the guys coming up like Demidov and Hage and Joshua Waugh. Like 2 years from now, this is just it carries them to that next stage, right? And then 2 years from now, you decide: do we still want to keep Patrick Laine if he's performing well? What might they
won't be able to afford him if he is? I really don't.
Deadline. If he scores, let's say he scores 30 goals both seasons, they're going to get probably another first-round pick at the trade deadline 2 years from now if they move him. So it's sort of, as I say, one deal leads to another, And if it doesn't work out, if Laine doesn't work out here, okay, they took a risk and it didn't work out, and it's only 2 years.
Yeah, and I get that. My whole thing is, how's he going to affect the room? And that's the big thing. And I know I've heard people say, "Oh, you want a good guy in the room," but listen, and this is a good room. They have a good room, right? You just hope that it doesn't get affected in a negative way. That's all. Now,
yeah, who was the coach? Was it Scotty who used to say, if he's good in the room, leave him there?
but boy,
but I know what you're saying, because this room is this is a really good locker room they have. They're really building something special here. When Shea Weber and was here, and he was captain, and Carey Price was here, they were the leaders, but they were like up here, right? And then the younger guys were sort of here. And it was when they made Nick Suzuki captain, I think it was a really smart move, because he's the age of these guys, right?
Yeah.
And he's the quiet leader. He's not the guy who speaks up a lot. I remember you telling me Bob Gainey was like that, not a guy who spoke a lot.
Big time.
He's in their age group, right? So they're all building together. And you go back to the Edmonton Oilers dynasties, back with Gretzky and those guys, right? The boys on the bus, they were all around the same age, right? They all hung out together. They had similar interests. They were good. And the room, being in this room now, it's a really, it's a fun room to be in. And they're having fun in the room. You can tell they want to win. They want to win. They're buying into what the coach is saying, is selling. And it's the culture in this team is really good. And that's a concern for me too, with Laine, who wasn't happy in Winnipeg, right? Wasn't happy in Columbus. Reminds me of Pierre-Luc Dubois, who wasn't happy.
There you go. All the red flags. I said this.
Red flags, right?
Jonathan Drouin had red flags, right?
And then Pierre-Luc Dubois 1 year in LA, and they had seen enough, right? And they got rid of him and traded him to Washington. So that's why I'm not like, but Ken Hughes would have done his homework on this. Pascal Vincent, who was the head coach in Columbus last year and the assistant coach 2 years before that, now head coach of the Laval Rocket, he would know Laine as well as anybody, right? And I'm sure they spoke with him a lot. Like, is this guy going to fit in the room? Is this guy going to be a disruption? Is this guy going to be a problem? Is he going to screw up the chemistry that we're building? And they obviously don't think he will. And Ken Hughes also mentioned he wants Laine to become a leader here. He's 26, which is young in the NHL, which is old for the Canadians. And he's been through a lot, Patrick Laine, right? I mean, he ended up in player assistance program with mental health issues. So he knows what it's like to be in a Canadian market in Winnipeg. He knows the highs, he knows the lows. And one of the interesting things Ken Hughes said in that Zoom conference, speaking with Laine, he says, remember the people and the things who helped you when you were a young player. And remember the people and the things who hurt you when you were a young player. I imagine you can relate to that too, because you're getting pulled in every direction, right? When you're playing, especially with the Canadians, you got good people pulling you, bad people pulling you, you're getting pulled left and right, and you got to make smart decisions. And I'm sure Laine has made some smart decisions. He's probably made some not so smart decisions, like most people. So if he's able to share some of those lessons he learned with the younger guys on the team, I think that can go a long way also. As you mentioned with Sean Monahan, when Monahan was here, I mean, he really helped Slavkovsky also. They were really close. And I know when just before Monahan got hurt, they had been playing him with Slavkovsky, and speaking with Slavkovsky about it, talked about how Monahan slowed the game down for him. Such a veteran that he could slow things down on the ice and let him sort of figure things out a little bit more. So hopefully for the Canadians, Laine can fill a similar role, but there's reasons to be skeptical about it with those red flags.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on the forwards. How about in the back end when we look at this, defensive core they put together? It's pretty incredible when you look at it. Matheson, Gooley, Hudson, Savard, the Jack guy, Justin Barron. Then you got Reinbacher, you got Mailloux. Like, man, some talent there. And the young kid, Connor Hughes, you got Eggstrom, you got so many guys. What do you think when you look at that defensive core? Who starts the season here in the top six?
I was jotting that down a little while ago.
Jaden Struble, sorry.
I'm thinking you got Matheson and Gooley probably as your top pairing again, with Gooley playing on the wrong side, which he's shown he's able to do that. I think they put David Savard with Lane Hudson. I think that's the guy. He played with Gooley when he first came up. He's played with David Savard's the sort of father figure, the calming influence. So I can see that be a pairing. And then you got Jack Eye, and like Barron has to clear waivers if they want to put him back down. So do
Yeah.
they put him down or do they keep him
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
Is him and Jack-Eye the third pairing? And if that is the case, then you still got Struble and you still got Mayu. So it's sort of I imagine I wonder if they're going to dress 7 defensemen some games this year as they break Lane Hudson in, and
Yeah.
have him for the power play and spot him here and there until they figure out if he can if he's big enough and strong enough to play defense in the NHL. But they have, as you said, they got lots of defensemen, a lot of good options, and they got great leaders like Mike Matheson and David Savard. You couldn't ask for 2 better guys to be leaders and mentors and role models for a young defense core. And Mike Matheson, I mean, coming off that season he had last year, if he can stay healthy again, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of point production he can put up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with all these D-men. And again, I'm sure some of those, along with some of those draft picks, are going to be dangled out there when it comes time to make that move to get those men. So that's a good position to be in. Guys they've done it really. They've done a hell of a job. And
we're not even mentioning David Reinbacher. I didn't even mention David Reinbacher in that group. Who?
Yeah.
I imagine they're going to do what they did with Mayo and have him play a full season in Laval and get just get used to the smaller rink and gain some confidence. He had a really rough season last year. He'd be the first to admit it. Canadiens management has admitted it wasn't agreed. Went through 3 different coaches. It was just not a good season for him. So that's another guy. So I mean, they're loaded with defense. That's why. Again, I wouldn't be surprised to see Kent Hughes make another move before the season because he's got this abundance of defensemen and draft picks. So he can make offer an interesting package for another forward who can score, or as you say, a man who can be hard to play against moving forward.
So do you think the Habs are happy with the goaltending situation right now, or at some point do you think they make a move for a goaltender?
I don't think so, because at this point, I think Jacob Fowler is the goalie of the future, right? And we're talking about how Patrick Laine gives him 2 years until Demidov or Hage or these other guys are come forward. And I think it's the same thing with the goaltending situation, because Sam Montembeault, I think, has shown that he can be a number 1 goalie in the NHL, playing 50 to 55 games, which is what there's very few goalies who play 70 games a year, or whatever Carey Price used to play. Caden Primo, I'm still not 100% sold on him. I'm not sure if he has the mental makeup to handle everything. He was much better at it last season. He spoke about that. Like, he doesn't hide from that. Like, he was, the first few seasons he was playing in the NHL, he was like a deer in the headlights. And like when he let in a goal, you could see his body language just drop. But I think they're in a situation now that these 2 guys together can hopefully get them until Jacob Fowler is ready to come up. And Montembeault has a 3-year contract. This is the last season of Primo's contract. He's got something to prove, right? He's got to prove that he's a legitimate NHL goalie. So I think they're comfortable with the goalie situation going into the season. And I think they're comfortable with Jacob Fowler and the progress. I mean, what an amazing freshman season he had at Boston College. And as I mentioned before, he seems to have the mentality they can handle playing in Montreal. And so does Sam Montembeault. I mean, Sam Montembeault was so calm and cool and relaxed and not too high, not too low. Nothing seems to bother him. He lets in a bad goal. He's able to shake it off. So that's really important to be a goalie here in Montreal.
I love to talk about Fowler. I do. Mm-hmm. But I remember the talk about Primo, too, coming out of college. I remember him at Northeastern. Now, did he leave too early? Who knows? But he spent a lot of time in the American Hockey League, and that's great. Some guys develop. I get it, and they have the tools. He had all those same tools in college, and now we've seen him on the ice. Sometimes he gets lost in his net. He overplays. He slides a little bit. I remember one game I watched him, and it happens. I get it. And just trying to pick out every little thing, but a lot of times I see him lose his net. He gets turned around a little bit. It's different at this level than college, no question about it. But this Fowler, that's great. But again, you got to get here, and the proof will be in the pudding when you get here. And,
but mentally, I think
it's positive.
With Primo, I think his problems here are more mental than the physical, and that might lead to him losing his net the way we see him lose it. And like watching Primo and Montembeault to an extent also, I think we didn't really appreciate, or some of us didn't really appreciate just how technically sound Carey Price was, right? I mean, he
Yeah.
made it look so easy, right? Going post to
Yeah, it's
post, never lost
unbelievable.
his net. I mean, the puck would hit him more time. He was so, and I think we saw him for so many years, and you almost take for granted what it's like for such a technically sound goalie. Then you see guys who struggle with the
Yeah,
technical side of the game, and
exactly.
it's interesting to watch. I remember one NHL scout telling me a few years ago, I was talking about goaltending. He says, teams don't appreciate good goaltending until you don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
And sort of take it for granted, and it's very, very true. I mean, when the Canadians love the downslide of the Canadians started in big part when they traded Patrick Roy, right? And they couldn't find anybody to replace Patrick Roy until Carey Price came along. So, but for Montembeault, I think he has the mental makeup to play here in Montreal. And speaking with Jacob Fowler at development camp, and that he seems to have it, but it's true. I mean, it's easy to say it until you've lived it. Until you've lived, after a bad game and going out and, people saying things or what's happening on social media or what people are writing about you, or it's not easy. So he seems to have it, but until you've actually lived the fishbowl experience here in Montreal, you don't know for sure that somebody's going to be able to handle it.
All right. Now, a lot depends on the Canadians' health, obviously. But when you look at this upcoming season, a lot of fans are hoping they get in the playoffs. They maybe expecting it. Some maybe not. I'm not expecting them to make the playoffs. Do I think they're going to be in the fight? I think they're going to help. I think they're going to be close. I think they're going to be battling for that last spot in there somewhere. Not as low as they've been the past few seasons. I look at this team, and now this is the time to make a move and out of the bottom 5 of the league. Is that asking too much? No. But I think they're going to be in that mix, kind of chasing that, and a lot closer than they've been in previous seasons. Now, that being said, I think after this year, I think the expectations will change for this team and this organization. Do you?
Yes, I do. Talking about a rebuild, 5-year plan is usually the standard thing with the rebuild. They're going into year 3 of this. They've made some really good progress. Before the Laine trade, I figured this team had no hope of making the playoffs. They just weren't going to score enough goals. Now I still don't think he's enough to get them over that hump, and they play in a really tough division too, which doesn't help. But I think you're right. I think they're going to play meaningful games later into the season this year. I don't think the playoffs are going to be gone, January or whatever, February. I think they're going to compete, and I think that's going to be really important because this team showed one of the things that really impressed me about this team and the leadership group and the culture is how hard they battled it right through to the end of last season when they were out of it, right? They weren't going to make the playoffs. They knew it, and they didn't pack it in. They kept competing. They kept playing hard. They were tough to play against. They lost so many one-goal games last season because they couldn't score enough goals, right? So do I think they're going to make the playoffs? No. One of the big keys to them either making the playoffs or getting close is going to be the power play, right? And I think Laine can really help them there, and I think Lane Hudson can really help them there. So if they can get that power play clicking much better and getting more goals out of that, they have a chance. But again, the defense, they have lots of defense, but they're young. There's going to be growing pains with Lane Hudson. If Logan Mayo's here, there's going to be growing pains with him. There's still growing pains with Arbor Jacki. We saw that last season when he got sent down to Laval. So it's a young defense with okay goaltending. As I said, I think Sam Montembeault can be a legitimate number 1 goalie, not a superstar goalie. He's going to give you a chance to win every game. He's not necessarily going to be stealing games for you. So for those reasons, I don't see them making the playoffs, but I think they're going to be fun to watch. I think it'll be a fun team to watch. And, I mentioned, Dvorak and Gallagher and Anderson. Those are 3 guys who are going to have something to prove, right? Josh Anderson, I felt for him last season because he loves playing for the Canadians. He wants to play for the Canadians. The season before at the trade deadline, I was saying they'd be crazy to trade him because the day you trade him, you're going to be looking for another guy like him. You talk about men. Remember him in the playoffs when they went to the final? He was a man. He was not fun to play against. So can he bounce back? Can Joel Armia continue what he did at the end of the season? This is a contract year for him. It lit a fire under his butt when they sent him down to Laval. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, it did. And mentally, he seemed to be in a better place too. I mean, he's a man too. He's not a big physical guy, but he's hard to play against, right? He's a big strong guy. Joshua Waugh I mentioned earlier. So there's a lot of guys that I think it's going to be a fun team to watch. And they've sort of been fun since Marty St. Louis took over. And what Patrick Laine talked about this, how one of the things that sold him on Montreal is, Marty St. Louis system. And all the guys talk about it when they come here and how much fun it is to play for him and how good he is at communicating. I remember asking Marty St. Louis last season or the season before, where's communication rank in your list of most important things to coaching? He said number one, without hesitation.
It's got to be number one.
Being able to communicate. You got to sell the systems or the concepts, as he calls them, that you want guys to play. And he's done a really, really good job of doing that. He has the instant credibility as a Hall of Fame player, but so did Wayne Gretzky when he was coaching, right?
Yeah, you got to earn it. You got to earn it.
You got to be able to. I don't know if Wayne Gretzky wasn't a good communicator when he was coaching in Arizona, or if he just didn't have the players, or a combination of both. But it didn't work out for him in the coaching end. It's a lot of other good players haven't been able to make it as a coach. But Marty just seems to. He's able to. He sees the game differently, and he's able to sell the way he wants his team to play to the players. And they're buying in. And we saw, Slafkovsky, as I mentioned earlier, I thought he should have gone back to Laval last year, but they worked with him. He caught on, and we saw the results.
It's funny you say that, but like I look at Lemaire, he was my guy and certainly loved him. And everybody's, the trap, this and that, and whatever. I was talking to Mike Pizzetta, and we talked about Marty St. Louis, and, we talked about some of the things he did with him, and Mike said, you know what? He told me things like, it's not good enough just to get the puck and get it out of the zone. You got to do something with the puck too. You got to play hockey. You got to play the game. And I remember Lemaire telling me the same stuff. He said, how long do you think you got the puck on your stick in a game? And I'm like, I wasn't even thinking. I'm like a minute and a half. He said, what? A minute and a half? He said, you're lucky if you have it on your stick for 15 seconds in a game. Lucky. So when you got it on your stick, you got to do something good with it. And that's why a lot of the practice we were geared to carrying pucks during certain drills, because he wanted everybody to feel more comfortable. Like the superstars, they got it. But the average players were carrying a lot more in practice and as a result improved with the puck and did things with the puck that maybe they weren't expected to do. So I can certainly, I felt a lot of Jacques Lemaire in that part of it. Working with a player one-on-one, I think he's incredible. That's why with Laine, I think it's going to be interesting, dynamic, Laine and him. And I think this is where, in the room and all that, it's one of the things I was worried about when they made this deal. But when you have a coach like Marty, I think a communicator like him, that I think he's going to be able to work with this kid. And a lot's going to hinge on that for sure. No question.
It's interesting you talk about doing those drills with Lemaire with the puck, because if at the Habs practice with Marty St. Louis, most of the drills are tight. He plays a lot of these little mini 3-on-3 games, and he wants guys to have the puck all the time and in tight spaces. You don't get the puck with a lot of open space in the NHL. That's all these drills for everybody to improve. And you're talking about Michael Pizzetta. I had that conversation with him also. And he said, before Marty came along, he was basically told, get on the ice, get it over the red line, dump it in, forecheck, get off the ice. In your zone, get it off the glass, get it out. And then Marty comes along and showing him video where he's dumping in. Said, why'd you dump it in there? Well, I was told, no, I don't want you to dump it in. If you have open ice, take it, use it, skate with it. And Pizzetta said it was so refreshing for him because, you forget, fourth liners in the NHL were star players in junior or midget or whatever. They're skilled hockey players, even if they're fourth liners. And so for him to have a coach actually said, carry the puck. Like, imagine the boost, as you said, with Lemaire telling you that. What a boost that would be for a guy. Like, I can actually play hockey. I don't just have to throw it in and go hit somebody. And it also gives him confidence in other parts, and it makes you want to play more for the coach, right? Knuckles, like you would want to play more for guys telling you to play hockey. So Pizzetta's an example of that. And he's, as he's told me, being the fourth line is one of the toughest roles in the NHL. As he's told me that there's times I'll go 30, 35 minutes of real time without getting on the ice. You get a shift halfway through the first period. You don't play again. You have the intermission. and your next shift is like 8 minutes or 6 minutes into the second period. You've been sitting for 35 minutes, not your legs, and to get out and do that. And Michael Pezzetta is able to do that, but probably with a little bit more of a boost when you have a coach who's telling you, don't just dump it in. If you have open ice, take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I look, there's a fine line because, right, you got to play within a system too. Okay, here's a system. You got to understand it. You got to play within that system. And it's so easy for players who've been coached a certain way, and you're told to do this and told to do that. I'm not going to say a robot, but you're a bit robotic. Okay, I get the puck here. I got to dump it in or else I'm in trouble. It's back, same thing with the trap back in the day. You had to be in a position if you're going to play that because you were responsible to the other 4 guys on the ice. If you are out of position, you're screwing someone. You have to be there for that to work. So you had to be disciplined within that. And if you left that, and it's like I look at the perfect example when Jacques came in and instituted the trap. Guy Lafleur couldn't play the trap. He just, Guy, man, let me go. This is a game. It's a reactionary game. Get out there. You got the puck, go with it. You don't have the puck, you're on defense. Go get, that's the game in a nutshell. You got the puck, you're on offense. You don't have it, you're on defense. And there was so much more into it when it comes to a system. So, it's just funny, like, to see a coach, not funny, but it's nice to see a coach who will work with guys like that. I love that because it worked with me. Lemire worked with me one-on-one.
Marty St. Louis, you mentioned Marty St. Louis has rules within his concepts for players. Yeah. And I was with Arpin Basu and I were talking with Jonathan Kovacevic at the end of last season about like what are Marty's rules, and he said, "Well, I'm not going to tell you all his rules are." And so, do you know when you broke one of his rules? And Kovacevic, "Oh yeah." And he said the previous game he had broken one of Marty's rules coming out of his own zone and did something he wasn't supposed to do. And as soon as I did it, he said, I went, "Oh crap!" And he hustled back and said when he got to the bench, Marty was giving it to him. And he said, this is the key. Kovacevic said, I felt so bad because I let him down. That's the player to say that. I felt so bad because I know the rule. I knew what I was doing. As soon as I did it, I realized I broke the rule and I was like, oh, crap. And he says, I got back to the bench. And he says, like, people say Marty's not tough enough on his players. Maybe you don't see him. And he says, he gave it to me. Like, he let me know that I had broken one of the rules. And you don't want to let him down. And he says, I felt bad because I let him down and let his teammates down, right? If one guy breaks the rules, everything sort of collapses, everything falls apart. So that says a lot about, Marty St. Louis as a coach and how
there's breaking rules. There's breaking rules and there's making mistakes.
Yes.
So
there's
another fine line, right?
Exactly. Like he probably broke a rule and then made a mistake, which made it even worse, right? So exactly. So you make a mistake with the puck. Marty isn't going to give a guy like you're telling Mike Pezzetta to skate with the puck when he has open ice. If he does, and there's certain areas of the ice where he's allowed to skate with it, like not in his own zone, probably, right? Like if he's coming over the red line, and if he makes a mistake, I'm sure Marty's not going to. He'll probably tap him on the back. Says, "Good, that's what I wanted you to do." And then the next day in video, maybe show him, you had another option. You could have done this. You could have done that. But yeah, exactly. It's breaking a rule and making a mistake are two different things. Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to this season. Yeah, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they're going to be more exciting. Guys have had that extra year. These younger guys now, they have another year under their belt. The expectation is going to go up, and then it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the trade deadline. I remember Hughes spoke with you, and he said, I can't wait till I'm a buyer, not a seller. And, we're getting close.
He tried to get Marchessault, right? They just wanted too much term, and he went out and got Patrick Laine, and they're trying to speed this thing up. And as Hughes and Gordon both said at the end of last season, the players, by competing as hard as they did right to the end, deserve for us as management to do something to give them a better hope of getting, and they've done that. The players are going into, every player, Knuckles, I'm sure even when you played on bad teams, you went into training camp saying we're going to make the playoffs, right? That's just your hockey players are built to.
I only missed the playoffs once.
Yeah, they're built to win. And so, but now they have, as I said, they have a legitimate chance to compete. And would it be a total shock? Like, oh my God, they made the playoffs? No. If the power play, if the goaltending holds up, if the young defensemen don't have as many
Health.
health. I mean, if
Kirby Doc is a big question mark, right? Kirby.
And it's not like Kirby. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, that's a major knee injury.
Yeah.
Like, is he going to come back and be able to skate the way he skated before?
I hope he does.
I hope so. I mean, after what he's gone through to sit there for that many games, and he goes back to his Chicago days when he broke his wrist right at the World Juniors. I mean, he's had injury problems.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Every year he's had them.
A big, strapping kid. I mean, he's a big, strong kid, and that knee injury he had last year looked like a fluke. Like, it wasn't like that hard of a hit. He went into the bench. It was sort of awkward. It was sort of to do that much damage to his knee. But he'll be chomping at the bit to play, coming back. And hopefully for him and for the Canadians, he can stay healthy, because adding him and adding Laine, that's two guys on your second line that you didn't have last year. So moving forward, it's going to be really interesting to see. And hopefully he can stay healthy, because it's got to be have been so difficult for him going back, as I said, to his days with the Blackhawks when he was injured early in his career.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see. And it's going to be an interesting and a fun season, I'm sure, for these guys. Hopefully they stay healthy and they're able to stay in the fight. And who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? It's all going to play out. It's going to be interesting. And
I'm interested to see Arbor Jacki too. Is another guy I want to see how he does this season. I saw the picture the other day on Twitter his mom shared of him and his brother buying his dad the nice Mercedes car. And I mean, what a story that family is, right? Blue collar, Hamilton. Two boys not only playing in the NHL, but playing for the Canadians.
Both parents came over here, right, in the 90s after the Iron Curtain fell. And
met in Hamilton. And
what a great story.
It's a wonderful story. And I remember Arbor telling me 2 years ago, I guess, that he wanted to make enough money so his parents could retire. His dad builds trains, and his mom works at Costco in the garage changing tires. And he doesn't have enough money yet, I guess, for them to retire. But they bought their father a pretty cool fancy car that he can drive around now to work and back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, it's going to be interesting, Stu. And, we'll have to do this again. I really appreciate you taking the time. And we'll maybe during the season here get your insights onto what's going on with the Habs if we can here at the Raw Knuckles podcast. It'd be awesome.
Anytime, Knuckles. My pleasure.
Thanks for taking the time.